There was the article in Time 3-4 months ago that basically said the average Israeli citizen was more or less just uninterested anymore, that they built the wall and we don't think about them anymore. Do you see that as a typical reaction of Israeli citizens?
Yeah, it's very true. It depends largely on where you live, of course, but if you live in the sort of Tel Aviv bubble, the fact that there's a conflict with the Palestinians doesn't really affect you. There's been no missiles that could have landed there so far. There hasn't been a major terrorist attack in Israel for 5 or 6 years. Israelis will claim that this is because of the wall, but and this is sort of an unfortunate case of timing. Roughly in the same time, the Palestinian sort of popular committees, as they're called, the people who lead the national struggle, took Western advice to adopt a strategy of nonviolence, which is many of the demonstrations you hear about and read about. And so the Israelis will claim that it's the wall. But I can tell you that crossing the wall costs about 30 shekels and uses the immensely modern technology of a guy in a pickup truck with a ladder who drives up to the wall. Migrant workers jump across and they come back at the end of the day. But people in Tel Aviv see none of this. They're not adversely affected. They don't see themselves really as being in a conflict. And why should they? They lead the exact same kind of life as any person in any other Western country would lead. Yes, they do military service, but a lot of people won't do it in the territories, won't have direct interactions with Palestinians. In fact, refusing to serve in the territories is quite common. And then you get some sort of relatively cushy assignment near home, and then you graduate, you go to India for a year, backpack, come back, and lead a normal life just like any other Westerner would. And they don't, not only do they not see the suffering of the Palestinians, but there's no effect on them, really, except for the climate of fear that the media cooks up, and that just encourages more, we need security first, secure this, any threat, neutralize it immediately, preemptively. And so, like in the Tel Aviv bubble, it has become so comfortable that there's not a lot of incentive for Israeli politicians to push for peace. What there's an incentive for is to push for the perception of security, because everyone's always pro-security and pro-safety and afraid.
This is the second time in a row and third time out of the past 4 that I've seen anything related to house demolitions that was Volvo and not Caterpillar. So my question is, has the BDS campaign, which focused on a variety of U.S. industries and Israeli industries, but one of the U.S. industries was Caterpillar, has that had, from what you've seen, has that had any kind of an impact, or was that just a sampling error that I've just seen 3 Volvo things and not Caterpillar?
The BDS campaign, it's difficult to say, because I'm a big believer in the BDS campaign, which is, not to buy Israeli goods or of any company, that's engaged in the settlement enterprise. And obviously Caterpillar is a major part of that, because they supply not only these bulldozers, but all the armored bulldozers in Gaza, etc. But I'd say it's a bit sort of too early for it to have had an effect. The most conspicuous project where it has had an effect is the Israeli light rail line in Jerusalem, where Alstom, which was a major French investor in that line, got embroiled in a massive controversy about its involvement and eventually withdrew, though not exactly really, leaving some consultants and but withdrew its investment certainly. But that wasn't entirely due to grassroots efforts, because one of the things that happened there, Saudi Arabia said, we'll give you this $2 billion high-speed rail contract on the condition that you withdraw from this project in Jerusalem. However, the BDS campaign, in my opinion, is really gaining steam, largely because some large investment funds are signing up to it. A lot of this has been, at least in the United States, has been church-driven, where places like the Presbyterian Church, I believe, the Mennonite churches have divested completely from any investment that is Israel-related. But these are recent developments, and so we wouldn't have seen really the effect of, say, Volvo bulldozers disappearing from the settlements yet. Yes?
ICAHD's been around for a long time. As these demolitions increase, tenfold, are there more and more Israeli students taking part? Is it growing at all?
It's difficult to say. I think the answer is probably no, actually. In a lot of ways, ICAHD has given up on its Israeli advocacy because the youth of Israel are actually more right-wing than previous generations have been, more anti-Palestinian, more security-focused. And it's very difficult, just to talk to people on the street. They, if there's even an inkling that you know Arabs or like them or anything, they really shut down and say, no, this is completely, beyond the pale. And you ask them if they've ever met a Palestinian. And they, of course, say no. And so what ICAHD has been doing is it's focusing its efforts on legal support for Palestinians who have home demolition orders, of which there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands. And although it can never really be overturned in practice, a lot of the time you can delay the order by years or even indefinitely by just grinding it through the Israeli courts over and over. And ICAHD does a lot of international advocacy, which is, of course, speeches like this one here. And the idea is that pressure from the outside is the only way to shift Israeli policy, because the left has been losing votes in Israel for years. There's almost barely any left to speak of. And so, essentially, the Israeli aspect of society, although there are some excellent Israeli activists, it's difficult to see the movement getting traction in the short term to involve a larger proportion of Israeli youth. All right.
Just one quick. Why, can you speak again? Why is there this uptick in demolition?
It's to do with the current government. It's one of the most right-wing governments. And essentially, sort of paradoxically, anytime there's a peace process that's kicking into a faster motion, settlement activity and house demolitions go up. Because in fear of a potential status agreement of some sort, Israel tries to essentially create facts on the ground in as many places as possible, and also to make the situation as intolerable as possible for the Palestinians, so they say, no, we can't negotiate under these conditions. The best analogy was from one professor at a Palestinian university who said it's like sitting down at a table with a pizza between two people, and you say, all right, now we're going to negotiate over who gets how much of the pizza. And the other guy just starts stuffing his face with as much of it as possible. And that's what Israel is doing. You're creating these irreversible facts on the ground that can't, that in any final status agreement, the international community would just say, fine, forget it. We may as well call these Israel now because they're already there. What are you going to do? And that's probably a large motivator behind the current state of demolition. And also the fact that people like Avigdor Lieberman are in the government. Shas is an ultra-right-wing party in the government whose spiritual sort of leader, Ovadia Yusuf, has said, you shouldn't rent to Arabs if you live in a Jewish neighborhood. You certainly shouldn't, allow your daughters to marry Arabs. And among other things, that non-Jews were created only to serve Jews. Essentially, that they have the same right to live as a donkey or any other farm animal that can be useful with. And obviously, this is a fringe person, but he's a very prominent rabbi, and the fringe party that he happens to be associated with is part of the coalition. And so the current government has these really strong right-wing secular nationalist and religious forces driving these kinds of policies. Okay?